Define hello. Pool care. Gen X dad is here. All right. What is going on?
What is going on, my brother? How are you?
Not much is going on quite yet. We obviously chat and you've come back in. Or there's still image issues, picture issues, video issues, whatever. You can get into other lives, not this one. Isn't that just fantastic? Let's see, do we have any issues here? Not that I can see. Live settings. No.
Blackbird says, oh, okay, Merc can see people, Blackbird.
Merc, all right.
And Crisp. So update and, or come back out and come back in, clear cache, whatever. Whiskey Trick, we're always good. We're pros.
You good? You good now? Yeah, we good. We good. Where are our creators at? I mean, right now it's awfully. I mean, for instance, when I pull up the panel to invite people, it's completely empty right now. There is nobody who could technically even join us. So something's going on. Trish got us. All right. What is happening here? Huh.
Hi, be kind. Hi-oh.
While we're waiting, if anybody's got any good tricks about loosening a pinched nerve in your neck that radiates down your arm, I am all ears.
I do. Lay on the floor. Find something to hold. Say it's pinching over here. Find something to hold that's good and heavy with your arm while you're laying flat on the floor, and just opposite pulls. Pull from both directions.
I'm willing to try anything at this point. Seeing that I have a 6-hour flight in 2 days, I need to get this. I need to get this gone.
That's when you use your charm to ask one of the lovely flight attendants, "Excuse me, ma'am, I have this
or
little,
sir,
not here, or sir, whichever way you
can flirt with both.
Float. True.
You can flirt with
very
both.
True. Hey, Elena, how are you? Watson 888, 868. Man, my eye drops are not working today. Okay, gray-haired gamer is in. All right, guys, we are trying to figure out where our panel is at. There seem to be some delays as well as some tech issues altogether. If not, we'll just shoot the shit and just invite whoever is willing to come on up. All right, hold on 1 second. Yeah, she's still in the car. She'll be joining us as soon as she gets to. All right, let me cross-check with her.
Yeah, Drew Drummer, we shouldn't be listening to Ben Stein. He went a little too far right, too.
Anytime, if the chat has any comments, questions, anything you want us to unqualified talk about, happy to do so. Gray-haired gamer.
Watchbar says, "You gonna let me in a box or what, man?"
Yeah, I'll consider that. Oh yeah, look at that. Watchbar. Boom, done.
What's up, Watchbar?
Gen X. Hello, milady. How are you?
Sir.
Are you doing good?
Good.
You
yeah,
sure?
I'm doing all right.
You know, I give you hugs every day.
I feel them. I feel them every day.
I don't always share likes and all that, but don't think that I don't ever watch. And Professor?
Yes, sir.
Sultry voice, and I love it forever.
Right?
What is going on?
Little Puma.
Turn the bass knob up.
little too much. Are you gonna be okay?
No, I said little Puma. No. What I want to say is the activities of the last days are
Pretty crazy.
incredibly accurate to history
Oh,
and incredibly inaccurate to where it needs to be. Because
Somebody just posted in the chat that according to, and I have not heard that, so I'm just going to repeat what I just read. The newest conservative history, Cleopatra is a white woman.
well, that is incorrect. Yeah, that is just a geographically incorrect statement, as opposed to
yeah.
religion, nor family structure, nor proven archaeology. Yeah, gonna go
They're
with
not
no.
even sure if she was like more Middle Eastern brown or if she
She
was
was right
black.
about it. She's the Nile.
Yeah, which could have been any number of
Correct. She was
like
not Aryan.
there's no time.
She was not within
She was
Caucasian.
not European at all. She was not Greek. She was not Italian. She was not any of the other malarkey that we
Constantinople
hear.
was not even invented yet.
Nope.
But let's not get technical here, shall we? Native chick, there she is. Boom. Invite sent.
Do you need me to leave?
She was not Elizabeth Taylor.
Taylor.
Well, she did have a bunch of husbands, so careful.
Tell me more about Morby Harper. Oh boy.
Did you see the video I tagged you and Morgan and Muscles in earlier from oh god, I think the Italian guy Matteo.
Yeah, I saw it. It
North
just
Carolina
happened.
basically.
Yep.
North Carolina basically rescinded the case to their own Supreme Court and said that they have the right to redistrict as they see fit, and that the Supreme Court would be out of bounds taking on the case. And so basically a big F you to the entire country to set precedents no matter what.
Yeah, I think I did record on Morby Harper about, what was it, like 2 weeks ago, give or take. The premise is the independent state legislator theory. In other words,
Melanie, yes, they will
for federal elections, that the states can essentially invalidate any form of federal election procedure and even set aside their own state constitution, which means as much as whatever you vote for is pretty much inconsequential.
I'm going to bounce out of here so you can have a panel.
Yeah. Thank you. And this, by the way, is WatchBar, the guy that keeps the back office safe. And TJ is here as well.
That's me. Bye.
That's you.
I need to make a watch bar note.
Indeed you do. Indeed you do.
I'm going to say hi as well, and then I'm going to say bye, and I'm going to drop down to the chat so that you have a more worthy panel, but I will be here.
You can stick around if you like. We have one slot open. Native Chick, how are you? Welcome. Glad you made it.
I'm having a little connectivity issues. I am moving my vehicle where I have stronger Wi-Fi. So hopefully I'm coming in clear, but I'll be clear in about a minute and a half, I hope.
You do that. Drive safely. We'll have you in here in about a minute and a half. If Nate is coming, we'll bring him up right away. I'm watching whoever is coming in right now. And TJ, the man with temporarily suspended live access, is back.
I thought you got it back.
I did. Good to see everybody.
How are you, sir?
TJ.
Good. I'm good. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So while Native Chick is parking, I know from various conversations that we've had that you have some tribal experience. You spent some time with elders. So from your perspective, just to have the overarching, I would say, view, what are we broadly missing as general society that we should know about tribal lands, tribal customs, tribal everything? Even I am completely ignorant to everything pretty much about tribal and indigenous America.
Do you have
loaded question? I know, big question.
Yeah. Do you have 5 years?
We do. We just don't go offline.
Yeah. I have spent 33 years with Native American people, and basically we have pretty much treated many of them like they're in a concentration camp. It's a terrible relationship, in my opinion, that we have with them when they have so much wisdom to share with us. But they are the poorest communities in the country, and we don't we don't do a good job with any part of our relationship with them. I don't even know where to begin, to tell you the truth. But they are some of my best friends on the planet, just because they are so caring and willing to share everything. So.
There we go. Made.
I'm wondering, just generally, I think we have an apprehension to learn from anyone who is unlike us. And since you're the psychologist in the house here with the clinical background, what needs to happen that we can actually get out of our own way and learn from those who have fundamentally more and better experience than we do?
For some reason, the dominant culture does not have the word humility in its language. And, you know, the root word for humility is humus, which means of the earth. And we're all of the earth. And we're no one's better than anyone else, including trees and birds and insects and human beings. And that was the main thing my elders taught me. And the second thing was to close your mouth and open your ears. That was such a big one for me. And I learned so much every time. So for example, I was taught the white buffalo calf woman's story. And then another woman came up and said, "Have you heard the white buffalo calf woman's story?" Now, the typical dominant culture answer would be, "Yes, I have." But I was taught that the indigenous, in particular the Lakota way, was to say, "Oh, I would be honored to hear what you have to say." Then they tell you the story. And maybe the story's a little different, but that doesn't matter. You say thank you so much and even give them tobacco or invite them for coffee. And what happens is that then you hear a second story. But if you say, "Oh, yes, I've heard the white buffalo calf woman story," that is the last story that you will hear from that elder, because they're going to think, "Oh, well, you must know everything, and so I won't share anything more with you." So it really does come down to just saying, I want to be a student. I want to hear from you, and to not battle everything they tell you, or to say, "Oh, that sounds silly," or "I disagree," or anything else. So.
To Indigenous Native American creators, and thank you so much for coming on. Native Chick, we had you in here for a few minutes last week. Thanks for coming back. Nate, you just got connected to us. Thank you so much for coming on as well. The intent of today is really to learn from you, because broadly, as a society, I believe we're just missing mostly everything as far as Native America is concerned. I think we've done, particularly as Europeans, a pretty good job in trampling over just about everything. So the question is, one, how can we actually become more receptive to what we need to learn, and how can we improve our relationship? Because the relationship, as far as I'm concerned, is certainly not wholesome and probably not quite functional. So loaded topic. The chat is going to weigh in. Please tag Ginge if you have questions or comments. Of course, as always, keep it respectful. That's how we roll in here. But just want to actually start with Nate.
Me?
Yeah, we haven't heard you, so we might as well get your voice in here.
No, thanks for having me. So I am real life friends with Canyon here. But I am I guess my name is Nate. Thank you for having me. Um, I am a reconnecting native in the Bay Area in California on Ohlone land, but I am Purepecha, and I used to identify as Chicano, but obviously there's a lot of decolonizing stuff there, right? So that's a little loaded, but Purepecha on my dad's side and Kiowa and Irish on my mom's, so I'm couple mixes of two great people. Um, Let me see, which part was the first one of how can we connect and improve? I feel like as pasty
Yeah.
as I am
Uh,
too, I have a pretty good perspective of both, at least the surface level, right? Um, Honestly, I feel like, well, I know Canyon's gonna have a bunch of stuff to say after, but um, I, sorry, I'm a little shy. I've never done a live before, actually, so I am
well,
a little
welcome to the
nervous.
first live. All right. This is a fantastic crew. You're in good hands.
Yeah, thank you. Normally, my content is not cultural based as much as like fandom stuff, so I appreciate you having me anyway. Um,
Of course.
so how can we connect? Honestly, as much as there's these big things we can do societally, right? Like um, that are currently under attack, such as critical race theory in school and stuff like that. That gives us really the fresh take that we need when we're young and learning and developing, right? Not only as a society, but how we connect with each other, especially in a place like America, where whether we like it or not now, it is a big melting pot of stuff. And it's kind of hard to do like a one broad stroke answer, but at the end of the day, it kind of has to go back to what what we can do locally. That's honestly the best thing, in my opinion, just little me, that locally you can do in your area. Everyone is on Indigenous land if you live on Turtle Island. Any state, any thing, and then also Turtle Island is all of North America. That's Canada, that's America, and that's Mexico. There's no place where you're on your own special, or with a lot of the current stuff going on right now where people are saying like, oh, we gotta flee, we gotta get out of here. That's not really a privilege any of us have. And also, what other, we aren't even accepted on the land that we come from. So how are we gonna just dip it all and run away when stuff gets tough? That's never been our MO ever. So with how white people come into that and just any non-indigenous people, um, it goes to, sorry, like I said, I don't want to talk in circles, so please cut me off. But
No, keep going. This is already great because I already have a follow-up question if I
yeah,
just want to hook
absolutely.
into that
Um,
afterwards.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But with that, check out locally whose land you're on. Like everyone always hypes up like, oh, in front of this event, we did land acknowledgement. That's literally what she does for a job, across the bay, and it's great, great work that it is, is really important. But that's typically where a lot of people stop with it. Like they go, oh, okay, we know whose land we're on. Anyway, proceed with the football game. You know what I mean? So that's not really doing anything. And also, I don't think that people, and I don't want to just be like white people, right? Just because I'm talking from like myself and my experience as well, and that is an overlapping experience I have.
In fairness, it'd be a
A
little
lot of the
fair.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So,
Like I said, I'm not just trying to dunk on stuff because that's not really productive either. But I mean, just from where I grew up in a predominantly white place and how my interacting identities have shaped the world around me or shaped my perception of it. Really, there's always something to do in your community, whether it be if you don't have like a tribal office or stuff like that, like land, like where I go to Canyons and I get to go help out at her place and lend a helping hand when I can. Um, you got to do more than just sign petitions. Like if you've ever been to a soup kitchen or things like that, people always think it's those kind of chores, and sometimes that overlaps with it. But the other part is the political identity of having to make sure that we're respecting the laws that we're all being forced to follow anyway. Like we're stuck in this colonial state, and even when we adhere to those rules, they're still not respected. There's still a double standard there, no matter how much we do, in the way that they say to do it. So I think boots on the ground is honestly the best thing you can do. And it really isn't as much work as people play it out to be. It is just checking out what's near you, and whose land you're on, and then going from there and connecting in a way that you're not going to be dead weight, you know. Just see what you can do.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Can I hook into something real quick that stood out to me? Either one of you, please feel free to jump in. You specifically said Turtle Island. What's the significance and the history? Because that's the first time I actually hear that term used.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
basically,
I'm so ignorant to the entire subject matter. So yeah, just throw the
I'm on
education.
Duwamish land, on Turtle Island, and Salish land. If you're, closer to, yeah, I know exactly where I'm at on Turtle Island.
yeah.
So
So Turtle Island
I
is,
need to send you some videos, Professor.
yeah. And it's a good way to describe North America because we have three countries in North America that are, countries now. But like I said, there's thousands and thousands of tribes that were all over here. Turtle Island the name comes from a creation story of being on which tribe specifically does it come from, Canyon? I'm sorry. There's many. It's one of those things, there's a lot of overlap. I can't
Pop quiz.
name, and obviously everyone can dunk on me. It's totally okay. Um, but that's just always what I've been taught it as. And because North America is the colonial name for it, Turtle Island encompasses the continent in which all these tribes come from, where our first peoples came from. Especially now that we know the Bering Strait thing is not what we originally thought it was back in the day in school, right? Because that was the era I grew up in school. Anything to add, Kenyon? Oh no,
You are muted.
off. You're muted.
Decimate that Bering Strait theory. First of all, because 10,000 years ago, that is not the origin of humanity in the Americas. Thank you very much. Yes, people did cross. Yes, they went back and forth. Yes, we shared DNA. Yes, there are humans that went back and forth. However, there is proof that there are humans in the Americas more than 60,000 years, more than 130,000 years, from tool markings to mastodons to footprints. Archaeological data is validating it, and that's through Western settler colonial narratives and science. So yeah, Turtle Island is a way of acknowledging we are on the back of the turtle. At the same time, it's a few nations that I've heard this from. So I also, with my dyslexia, misplaced the names to some of the stories. So apologies to the group. Apologies to Ojibwe. Thank you. Yeah,
I knew
Ojibwe.
it. I was like,
The way I put it
awkward.
is further. The way I say it is further east of us, because in California we are on the western edge of the world. And when it comes to California, a lot of indigenous peoples recognize that we come from the land. And some of the creation stories, we come from the clay and the soil. Some creation stories, we come from elderberry. Further south of here, Selenian territory is approximately south of Monterey Bay, a little north of Santa Barbara. Selenian Nation, they have clapper sticks, and it's a musical instrument, and that tree is elderberry, and it's a medicine, and their communities, they are of the earth, and that's where the first humans were given land as human flesh, what originally was elderberry. And so many nations have their creation stories, of which are place-based knowledge, place-based wisdom. It's of their bioregion, of their community, of their ecosystem. And so a lot of our communities are very diverse. Yes, we've heard of 500 nations, but there's in excess of 500. In California alone, 250 language dialects, meaning different societies and different governing structures. And from that, we have diverse communities and truths and histories and stories. And so different languages, different cultures, different parameters. Just because we're under the umbrella of Native American or indigenous to the Americas does not mean that we are a monolithic culture. So yes, Pan-Indianism was very helpful coming together, especially during civil rights movements, 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the 90s. Indigenous communities came together by acknowledging, hey, we're Indigenous, you're Indigenous, from the occupation of Alcatraz in 1969 to a lot of the intertribal friendship houses popping up amongst the community and amongst the nation in different territories. So being Indigenous is an interesting layered occurrence in the Americas, because we are fighting settler colonialism. We are also struggling with just being acknowledged that we exist, because just let me explain something. I get to talk to teachers in my profession, right? I get to talk to teachers saying, I recognize that you aren't a racist. However, the education system and the way the English language teaches you, you are engaging in cultural erasure just by with what you're taught, such as utilizing telling stories in the past tense, meaning if you've never met a native and you tell stories in the past tense by saying, the Ohlone people were here. They used to live over here. They used to present themselves this way. They use this. They use that. By putting us in the past tense, you are actively engaging in cultural erasure, which is putting us in the past tense, which is then pushing us away from the concept of we aren't here. We're not here, but we are. Like denying our existence by putting us in the past tense is problematic. Yes, we might not be in our traditional regalia full time. We might not be traditionally in our original dwellings because we have been pushed off of our homelands and we haven't been able to access our cultural resources of which we can't harvest in ways that we traditionally would have. We still harvest our traditional medicines. We still work with the ecological diversity in our environments. However, yeah, we still wear plants and animals. Literally, I'm wearing animals and plants today. However, it's not in the way that history or history books would say, ooh, these scantily clad native primitive savages are presenting themselves. And so we're not erased. So I just want to point that out. And so like
Um,
I'm a
Mm.
native who's raised on the land of my ancestors, and Nate is a reconnecting community member. And those are diverse perspectives that are valued and valuable because there is no one way that a community can be represented.
particularly the past tense perspective struck a chord with me from a teaching perspective. TJ, would you think that this is by design, or is it an accident, misnomer, mislabeling, misrepresentation of the past versus present, what should be versus what keeps us safe by saying it has been?
I think it's a great question. I think it's probably by mistake, but it could also be unconscious. I really think it could be an unconscious way of continuing the genocide. I haven't thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah, paper genocide is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, I'm seeing two comments here, by design and no mistake at all. And I'm leaning also in that direction, that at some point it was very much, I would say, by design to say, okay, we are speaking about Native America in past tense, and it has essentially taken hold and then become the standard of consideration, as erroneous as it is, because we do have plenty of tribes in the United States. I mean, we have the Bureau of Indian Affairs, where we are constantly trying to reconnect people who think that they have ancestry within the tribal nations, and it is unbelievably difficult to reestablish, by the way, those connections. So for Nate to come back and having found footing again is, I think, just profound. So congrats to that, by
Especially
the way.
south of the border natives.
When I have college students that think Native American people still live in teepees and wear deer skins, and I'm not joking that there are people who still believe that. I mean,
That, sadly, there are. I mean, I've lived in two heavily indigenously empowered areas. When I lived in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, there were like outreach programs to find people descended from the Cherokee and reconnect them to the language. You go to the casinos, you go to any of the businesses on res land, and you've got English and in Cherokee. And then, of course, I live in Tacoma, and the fact that people absolutely think that, indigenous folks live in teepees is ridiculous. And then that's not even getting into if you go down to Laredo, Texas, and you see Latino or Hispanic, and you see indigenous folks down there just riding high down there. Like
Yeah.
they are still very cautious. Like common Tulsa win, dude. That's a rare Tulsa win, sir. Rare Tulsa win. To be fair.
How many different tribes, and I know this is probably a far out of bounds question, but how many different tribes on estimates do we actually have represented in the United States? And I think more importantly, how do tribes communicate to uphold culture, to uphold their individual languages? You just mentioned that there's a bunch of different dialects. And I have talked with various members of tribes who are also no longer speaking their tribal language. So how are we keeping culture alive, and how are we interconnected within tribes?
What I do know is there's like this project called Project 562. I'm dyslexic. I might be incorrect. I think it's called Project 562 or 362. There's this woman named Matika. She's going around interviewing Indigenous relatives, and so in California there are in excess of 109. It might be up to 111 California federally recognized tribes. There's more than half of that are also petitioning, so about 70 or 73 petitioning for federal recognition. So what? That's just about like 180 people, tribal groups seeking acknowledgement in California. That being said, we have that wonderful book called 500 Nations. So that's 500 nations without including California. So there's in excess of 500 nations, 600 plus? And the thing is the amount of cultural erasure, like, the challenging part is there are common names and then assumed names. Like if you ever meet someone who says they're in Navajo territory, my relatives who I know who either once acknowledged the term Navajo, they are, as they reconnect to culture and community and language, they start using the word Dene, because the word Dene means people. The word Dene is, they are the people of the land and the people that they're using their language. And so the hard part is when we talk about nations and groups, look at someone said 700, there are ways that we reconnect, and sometimes we connect and we think we are of one circle of community. Like here in California, an example, my mother and another nonprofit, my mother's nonprofit and another nonprofit interviewed Indigenous peoples who identify with the term Ohlone. I am a proud Ohlone person. However, that is a misnomer. That word did not exist pre-1800. It came from an Indigenous word, Oholon, from a single village site. However, that word did not exist. So there are people who identify with the word Ohlone, and so she interviewed them by acknowledging them, who they are and what they knew growing up. And most of the time, the stories were keeping the sacred secret, making sure that you didn't out yourself, because, you got 1850s. United States government validated $1.4 million in bonds, $5 a head, 50 cents a scalp. So 1850s, that's gold rush. But then there's this thing called the Dow's Act, 1887, where they allotted land. Every male got 140 acres, every female 90 acres, every child 40 acres in California. And that's where this concept of, also where $5 Indians comes from, when the allotment was giving land back to Native peoples. That's less than 30 years. That's barely a generation, maybe two if you're having kids young. But dominantly, are you really going to out yourself after you were just getting beheaded and scalped? Valid scalping. Like I was taught with Western movies, it was the natives who were scalping. No, we were scalping back. But that being said, Ohlone peoples were sharing their stories, and so we have a project with on our website where it's honoring a California legacy, interviews with community members talking about both reconnecting to their indigeneity as well as honoring their ancestors. And with that comes the journey of genealogy. Sometimes we run into family names and family trees with the similar last name. And so when you're looking through your genealogical record, you may think you have a tie to one family and you might be related to another depending on the birth years and death certificates. And with that, the challenging part happens to be you might believe that I have some relatives who we saw them as Ohlone relatives, and they were dancing with us, singing with us, working on regalia with us, revitalizing language with us, and then they find out they have another family member and it ties them to some tribal territory further south of here, like Santa Barbara, meaning that they're realizing that, oh shoot, we got some Chumash ancestry. Okay, so they're no longer Ohlone, they're Chumash. And then some people look at them and are like, hey, weren't you dancing with the Ohlone group years ago? Now you're trying to play Chumash? It's like, no, I'm learning. I'm reconnecting and attempting to acknowledge my genealogy to the best of my ability, both with written record and genealogical record and language. So it's a journey in that process of identity.
And I just want to relate that over to us white folks, and also the long established history with the Irish and the Indigenous Americans. We're finding when we drop into the histories of, the Scottish clans, the Irish clans, we have similar stories as Turtle Island natives. as far as tribes and how we intermingle. And yeah.
Yeah, I got
Nate,
Irish, Celtic, and Scottish, and Swiss, and Dutch ancestry, so it's right there. I'm trying to honor
We
those
Irish
roots
got
as well.
around. Sorry.
I know my mom and my grandma had a thing, and I'm dating one. Oh, gee, it looks like there's a pattern.
clearly, but we're not going to get into that because that's going to get us booted from here in a second. Nate, reconnecting, finding entry again into who you actually truly are. What was that process like? How did that function? How were you welcomed, and how does this affect you right now?
So I've never been to my homeland. Full disclosure, I'm always very transparent about that.
Sure.
The way that I knew, so basically the way I grew up, we always had like decorations on the walls, and there were a few experiences I had socially living where I live as a kid, where I kind of got picked on. I didn't quite know why, because also I'm the lightest one in my family, save my half sister who has a different dad. I'm the whitest one in my family. So uh the times I did have anything bad happen locally, it was not intrinsically, oh, you're native. No, no, no. It was like, oh, wait, that's not what you want. They'd think it's something else, or they'd be like,
Deal.
you're the way it happens in like super homogenous towns, and Canyon can that because we're from the same place. Um, White people notice when you're not fully white. That they all there's like, at least in the kind of town we grew up in, I never really related it to that. My family said we had lineage, so I just kind of was like, oh yeah, we're that. I'm Chicano too, so I just figured I'm a nice little mixed bag of stuff. But then as I got out of high school, around that time frame, I started actually looking at what those connections were, and there is certain traumas with those connections. So it took me a little longer to kind of come around, and then I've always been reconnecting on my dad's side because he is kind of not the way that white and white and native mixed people and like Chicano or Mexico over the border mixed people interact with each other is very, very different experiences. And also, if you're a south of the border native, you don't really have the same access to your history. So it basically goes off your family connections. And I have not been to Mexico either. My family's from Celaya, um, which is in Guanajuato in Peninsula Territory, and I only know that because reconnected with my uncles because I wasn't very close with my dad's side. So everything has been in my early adulthood to now. I'm 31 now, so it's been about 10 years. I know. I'm sorry, you're raising your hand. Um, did you want to
No, that
go? I
just
don't
means
mean
no.
to.
That just means that she's next whenever you're
Oh,
done.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we
for sure.
usually don't interrupt anyone because if you want to share, that's the space to
I
share.
am patient.
Hmm.
I am a good teacher's
No,
pet,
for
but
sure.
this
I
round
just
can
try
go
not to
all
go too
day.
long because I know sometimes I forget what I was doing. Um, but it's been a process. That's why I'm a big advocate for until you can get to your cultural connections, like on your homeland, reach out to people who are also of that same tribe and let them guide you. Honestly, that's really anything I say is just kind of, I don't want to say a bystander because it is something in my family that it took a while for us to kind of grasp onto. And also, I never want to be the whole I was always very aware of the whole stereotype of the like, my grandma was a Cherokee princess. You know what I mean? No one ever fucking, flipping. I'll keep my mouth shut. Wants to be perceived or be parallel to that while you're decolonizing. Really, it is like get in your close areas, volunteer where you can, and then it should be not only personal but interacting with your community. So I do that to the best of my ability, living all the way in California. Um, but that's like an eventual goal is to go over there and talk a little more
Okay.
in depth with relatives that I now know that I have, basically.
Change.
Okay, so on behalf of white people, if you have the rumor in your family that you have a Cherokee princess as a grandma, it ain't true. And it's to separate
Nope.
themselves from their own whiteness. See Royal Star for more information on that. Secondly, this is by actual question. One of the things I've recently started learning for myself, thanks to John Leguizamo, I love that man. He has a documentary called Latin American History for Idiots or something like that. And he correlated how when we talk about Chicano, Hispanic, Latino, Central and South America, as well as Mexico, when they're doing genealogies and DNA, it's when you get California, Southwest America, it's almost indecipherable between because of those fake lines on the map,
Hmm.
right? Right.
Hmm.
So, would you, if you would, Venom, Nate, would you explain, because this actually came up on another live, the difference between Chicano, Latino, and Hispanic
Okay,
for
so
Hispania.
the class?
for my understanding, just because Hispanic used to be the main one that was used when I was a kid, and like even then we kind of were like, what? Um, so Hispanic is if you're descended from any Spanish speaking country. So that also could mean like Europe, Spain. Over there,
It could be
they are,
España.
no matter what anyone, a pop star nowadays said, because I know there's always little discourses like that, Spain is not Latino. Spain is not Latino, anything like that. They were the ones that colonized us, and they are European. People oftentimes just correlate those two things, or depending on where you're from in the United States, like if someone says like, oh yeah, she's Spanish, they mean another kind of Latino, but they don't mean Spanish. They just mean they're speaking Spanish. Latino is basically anyone in the um, in the countries within Latin America. So that also means
Okay.
non-Spanish speaking countries.
Okay.
So Brazil, they speak Portuguese, things like that.
Portuguese. Yeah.
Yeah, the Caribbean, everything like that. And then, sorry, what was the first one you said? Oh, Hispanic, Latino, and
Chicano.
Chicano. So Chicano was not only an identity in the like 60s and stuff, especially during like this. Everyone always knows like Cesar Chavez, all that stuff, but like um there was a lot of different Chicano movements going on that's like the main one because he was like a good face. But when you look kind of under the layers, there was like also a lot of stuff going on during that time too. That was also the age where like my dad's era and his parents before that when they first came here um were like that not only had like a social identity, but it was like a political identity as well. That being said, there's a lot of stuff that we know today in the same way that pan-Indianism was helpful for a time, like a small window in time, right? Trying to just bring awareness and come together, et cetera, et cetera. We also know a lot of the things that are wrong with that now, and how that kind of does sort of damage, cultural connection as it all gets just mushed together. And with
Antiquated
Chicano's
term,
being
was it mestizo? I think that
Yeah, so
was
well, that's the thing too, is interestingly enough, the reason that we navigate differently in like US natives who are like mixed with American or whatever white thing, right? And then indigenous as only because I'm trying not to be too vague, but like also I don't want to
it's
say
okay.
nothing, right?
It's okay.
To get you guys booted, right? But in Mexico specifically, let's say, we had to go through the caste system. So here it's always been a little more treated like we have, the American boarding schools and like, kill the Indian, save the man stuff here. In Mexico, however, yes, you will get called Indio. Yes, you'll get called, or mestizo. Mestizo used to be insulting for a while too. People often forget that. It's trying to
Yeah.
be reclaimed, but there's a lot of discourse around that, so I kind of don't want
And
to
that's why I wanted to
input
bring
too,
that
and
up
rightfully so,
because,
rightfully so.
yeah, rightfully so.
Um, because especially too, it's silly of someone
Oh, there
me
we
from
go.
here
We've
to
got it down there
go
in the
tell.
chat. Mestizo is a
Yeah,
Spanish
mixed race.
colonial term for mixed
Yeah,
race, European
so
and
from La
native.
Costa, because
Yeah.
whiteness was something to be achieved. Like people often forget the whole like La Raza, like La Raza. It's short for like La Raza del Cosmica, the cosmic race. Which who does that sound like?
Us.
You know, yeah. Well, and
In fairness.
specifically, I think don't know if you could say it on here, but Yatis, right? That
Yeah.
ideology, there is thing, and a lot of older Chicano literature has that as its backbone. And we didn't really know that back in the day. Now that we know and we have a lot more context to it, That's why I definitely see why a lot of natives like kind of separate from the term. The only reason
I
I
get
kind
that.
of keep it for myself is because, like, one, that's the culture I was raised around in my immediate face. Um, and also I identify as that still, even though there is overlap, because like I think it's important to acknowledge not only that stepping stone in my family, but like that Chicanos as a whole kind of have to decolonize if we want to get things moving for both of our peoples, right? For, you know, Mexican Americans, the Chicano subculture itself, that is still political, and like it is coming around. That's why I can't really drop the term, because, you know, but a lot of people have different opinions on it, especially if you're outside of California, right? So I hope that covered at least a little bit. And
Oh
yeah,
That
no,
that
that's
that
was
my
thank
that
you.
was
opinion.
that was
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
TJ. I'm wondering from a cultural participation perspective, if you will. I've seen joint powwow best experience ever in the chat coming through a couple of times, and I'm not exactly sure who's who and how this actually correlates. So I want to just ask you, TJ, what is your understanding actually really from the internal cultural mechanics of a tribe with elders and a quasi hierarchy, if you will? How does that appear to you before we actually get the full lowdown from Native Chick?
How does it appear to me in terms of what?
Just how is the culture organized in a sense from our perspective, and how do we need to reframe this with the authentic culture then through Native Chick's layer on top of it? I know, loaded question. I'm not known to ask easy questions.
Yeah, so I don't think it's not so much loaded as probably my experience is very different, because in 1990, when I went to the Rosebud and lived with the people for the period of time that I did, only about, and this was from the Lakota people, only about 5% of the people on the Rosebud were practicing traditional ceremony. And those are the people that I was with. And so I was deeply involved in that. I never went to a powwow the entire time I was there, and not because for any other reason except that that wasn't on my radar screen, you know? But I would say when groups of people came to the Rosebud in the summer and they had a choice between going to bead making or going to an Inipi ceremony, they chose bead making, which always struck me funny, but they always chose to do the dominant culture classic Indian thing instead of trying to find out where the deep culture truly was. That's how I would answer the question.
Thank you.
Eh,
Native Chick, come on in.
we're,
I know you're just brimming there. Let's go.
I love that we're diving into this. This is intriguing. Okay, as an educator and as an activist in my territory, teaching people that we exist in our own backyard, usually I always hit the surface nature of stuff, and they're like, why aren't you federally recognized, or why is this, why is that? And right here in this conversation, we're diving into like indigeneity and identity, and like, okay, like how settler colonialism is so pervasive. Like, okay, go to Inipi or go to bead making. Why? Economic value, survive in the world, share art, celebrate identity, celebrate art, and survive in the world. Go to the powwows and hustle. You got to survive, you got to represent. So that's still cultural pride and still identity at the same time. Inipi and other ceremonies is a sacrifice, is a challenge to some of us. Inipi is a ceremony in the Lakota territory, and we have in Indian Canyon we host multiple cultures and multiple intertribal communities. So we have in excess of 10 sweat lodges on our land. So we actually have lodges that serve different communities. We have Lakota style lodges and California style lodges. So I've been lucky to participate in ceremony with other community cultures. So I've been in different ceremonies. So from lodges, I have not done a Vision Quest. I have been a supporter of people in Vision Quest. I have been invited to Sundance. I do not want to Sundance. That is a beautiful sacrifice that I am not ready for yet. Maybe in my lifetime. I don't know. California natives, we don't have that. However, when you keep getting invited, there's a sign, and I'm like, please, no more signs, please. Thank you. No. I don't need my invitations anymore. Thank you. I love you. But that being said, when it comes to ceremonies that are more of the culturally in depth, you are becoming of service to your ancestors and of service to your community. And sometimes some people aren't ready for that journey. Some of us are just Indigenous people. We just want to be Indigenous people. We're not the woo-woo spiritual being who's going to tell you your dreams. We're not the medicine carriers or the people who know the edible plants. Some of us are just native and just want to be native. I am the loudmouth example of an activist, artist, edutainer, but also a spiritually connected and bound community member, of which I participate in ceremony, and I also facilitate some ceremonies. I'm not like a ceremonial gatekeeper. However, when ceremony needs to happen, I listen, and I'm of service, however that is called. And so I'm not a lodge leader. I'm not like there's no such thing as Native American shaman. Okay, there's doctors, but so that being said, there's spiritual work that some people do and some people may not be ready for. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, questions?
We do have a question from the chat, and I love this question. I kind of answered it from a white perspective because, like I said, I lived in Oklahoma and I'm on Duwamish land. When we are invited to a powwow, how should us as white folk behave ourselves?
With respect and humility to the best of your ability. So one, just because we are in a public place, do not follow the assumption of, you're in a public place, we can take pictures all we want. It is nice to have a consensual, communicative dynamic of, I really love how you are showing up in the world, and I would love to keep this memory. Is it possible I take a photo? Or consent. Consent is key. So there's many times that ceremonies happen outside and people are like, oh, it's a public place, we're entitled to take pictures. And it's like, that's just rude. Similar, like powwows are social gatherings. So there is an element of ceremony and spirituality in regards to how people conduct themselves, i.e. there's opening prayer, there's the gourds Society and the veterans, and then there's also how people conduct themselves when they put on their regalia, how they present themselves in community. So there is ceremony intimately with the families. However, dominantly a powwow is more of a social gathering. It's more of a community space of connection. So not as commercially as a carnival or a fair. At the same time, it is the gathering space. It's a bit more respectful than like a flea market. It's further east of us. So we have big times, and big times are still where people celebrate. You bring your skills, you bring your tools, you bring your resources, and you share, you trade, you support, you learn. And so at powwows, we have competition dances. At powwows, we have culture sharing opportunities, language sharing opportunities, nonprofits sharing their resources, artists, medicine carriers, culture bearers that are present there. So there is respect and solidarity and spirituality on the surface. So being considerate about your spiritual energy. So not coming drunk, not coming intoxicated, not coming overexposing yourself. So like you wouldn't go into a church in your bikini, right? You wouldn't go in there hammered or intoxicated or rolling on intoxicants. Like that is not the place to be doing this. Most of these events are named like sober. People are on the red road, and just be humble and respectful. It's okay to ask questions. Dominantly, we got 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth. So listen twice as much, watch twice as much. Sometimes the answers are there. So just being respectful, right?
Question to that before we jump down to Gen X that real quick. So you just mentioned dress code, which I fully support. You shouldn't dress basically too, I would say, obvious and really stand out. But I can also see that there might be the pendulum swinging in the exact other direction to dress overly native and culturally appropriate. So where is the accepted measure or the best measure?
Well, as an indigenous person, I used to go all blinged up with my regalia and all my medicine. And there are times that my native relatives will be showing up representing. Now, there's nothing wrong with being proud of the indigenous dresses, indigenous gifts, indigenous medicines that one may be gifted, because there's nothing wrong with a non-native person wearing necklaces that are indigenous, both because they find it beautiful, they supported a native artist. You're not buying something from China, I hope. So you support a native artist, and so you're supporting artistry, ideally not dressing up to play Indian. So if you're going to be going dressed up, know about what you're wearing. This is considered regalia. It's not a costume. So if you know about your regalia, community members are welcome to bring their regalia. But the problem is when we're babies and we're toddlers in learning of reconnection, sometimes we make some missteps where we want to go excited and dress what we feel as though is our community. Like, I've watched some of my California natives wear the breastplate of one territory and a ribbon shirt and another skirt and Apache style leggings and pants, and I'm sitting here like, what are you? I understand, like, you're trying to honor many elements of your ancestry. At the same time, if you were to just take a moment and like
Secret
dream
Indian.
on it or listen to your elders or your ancestors, do you think that they would want you dressing up in these things? It would be like someone like, I want to honor my uncle who's the Pope and put on a Pope hat and then put on a skirt from another territory, or let's say a kilt. Someone's wearing a kilt and then they're wearing, I don't know, an Indiana Jones vest because they want to celebrate their anthropological or their archaeological degree. And then they have the Pope hat where it's like, I'm honoring all of these elements that I want to represent and respect. It's like, are you respecting them by flexing all of them out of context? So there's nothing wrong with being proud of what you're wearing, but know what you're wearing. And if you don't know, it's still okay. Like, I still love those damn shirts with all of the art, the stereotypical wolf and the bear. I'm that native who likes those art pieces because I'm an artist. But it's so pan-Indian and it's so overdone, and sadly, it's been done in what is the word? In mass-produced. At least
Yeah.
it has been by some native artists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Support native artists is dominantly, and then honor truth and history, to honor your elders and your ancestors, and most of it will come to you. Be like, I wear this for this reason, and you can be what you want to be. If that makes sense.
That does make sense. And I caught in the chat the word super Indian, which like I commented back. This is as funny as it is painful that there actually is a term for it. I mean, it says everything we need to know. Gen X, sorry that I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you didn't cut me off. I first want to say what an amazing panel this is. You are absolutely amazing. I'm going to come at this from a different perspective, being half white and half Asian. And I'm going to address Ginger's earlier the same question in a different way.
Okay.
There are two kinds of white people that we're going to address here. All right. We're going to address,
That's fair.
hi, I'm Becky, and this is my boyfriend Todd, and we're just going to fucking take pictures whenever we want because we're just so entitled to do so. Right. I think white people tend, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. So in my travels, and I have been all over Southeast Asia, in my travels, I can relate in certain ways. I can relate when white people show up to, forbidden cities within Taiwan and China, and they start mimicking the Japanese dress code, not understanding what the hell country they are in, right? And these are the white people who just don't know any better and think that whatever it is they do is enough. And to me, it's the white people that are afraid to ask the questions, which is what I think it is we need to get over. We need the white people okay asking questions, because I have to go back to a way earlier statement that the professor asked very specifically about how can white people get more involved? How can white people understand? And the problem is that the white people are not asking enough questions. The white people are not understanding that there is a difference between the Lakota tribe and the tribes down in South Florida. For example, between the Sioux Nation and the Lakota tribe, there are huge cultural differences. And what we as white people have done in America, as well as religious institutions, is we have whitewashed all of it. to the point that an Indian is an Indian is an Indian. So if we just teach you the basics, it will just go all over, right? It will just, it applies to everybody. They did the same thing to the Asians. They did the same thing to the Chinese, to the Japanese, to the Taiwanese, to the Filipinos, to the Vietnamese. And now you've got white people dressing up as samurai because they want to mimic Bruce Lee, who is Chinese. And
or Steven Seagal. Steven Seagal is
oh,
just a blues
please no.
guitarist,
Oh,
white ass dude, conservative right, and just
and the fact that he dressed up
appropriative.
as an Indian makes him an even bigger motherfucker. I mean, oh my God. I mean,
We are
he's
now
one
And
picking
that
now
on
I
we
can
know
Steven
why this
Seagal.
video needs to be set to adult only when I upload it to YouTube.
see.
Thank you, guys. I much appreciate
We
you.
can we can equally be as aggrieved by the existence of Steven Seagal because he has
Yes,
appropriated
we
all
can.
of our cultures. The
He's
point that
appropriated
I'm making,
everybody.
yeah, the point that I'm making is that I have been corrected by black people in other spaces, right? Because I have asked questions like, how can I be a better ally? How can I be a better ally? And I sincerely mean that. To our indigenous partners, I sincerely mean that. How can I be a better ally? And I get a lot of the same responses back. We are tired of teaching white people. We are tired of teaching white people. And they're not wrong. What I really think we really need to do is I think a lot of the education comes from us. It comes from the white people. It comes from us, first of all, acknowledging that we have allowed religion and white people to whitewash so much of this history into oblivion. And that's something that we have to address. We have to address that as white people. And I'm so sorry. I know you're trying to talk, and I'm so long-winded. So I will stop with that for now.
You are, but I want to actually bring something else in. Since, in full disclosure, this wonderful gentleman with the unkept facial hair and I go 15 years back, actually 18 years. So we have a very close friendship. He's probably one of my best friends on the planet. And I also know that you are from the island, so you understand the Samoan perspective, which I would presume, in my absolute whiteness, is not completely removed from the indigenous perspective and experience here on the mainland.
Well, it's not.
What is it in Hawaii?
And it's not the Samoans; it's the native Hawaiians, and the native Hawaiians have had it. I don't want to say just as bad, but they've had it bad to the point that their lands have been ripped away, and there are very, very, very few native Hawaiians even left in existence. As a matter of fact, the Bishop Estate, which has taken over for land ownership in Hawaii, the Bishop Estate has lowered their standards for what is considered a native Hawaiian anymore in order for them to get a hold of the lands. And I have a neighbor right across the street who is actually no shit native Hawaiian who moved here to Las Vegas because he and his family can no longer afford to live on their own land. And they're on a wait list. That's probably, it would probably be easier to get Green Bay Packers season tickets than it is for them to get to get land due to the native Hawaiians. So the thing is
the
that
Packers fan.
it says the Packers fan, but the thing is that they have not seen the mass genocide that our indigenous have, but they have seen it bad. So that's about the closest correlation that I can make. Go ahead, Ginge.
Yeah. Before we get to the audience question, hold on just a second. Native Chick, you held the pamphlet up, the How to Be a Better Ally, or I forgot the exact wording. Can you introduce us to this and how we get it?
I love it.
So on my website, canyonconsulting.com, on it, I actually have pillars of solidarity. So exactly what we've just been talking about, literally listen and observe twice as much as you speak, active education, active community building, acknowledgement of native lands. So on my website, I have resources, canyonconsulting.com. And actually, I was going to possibly join. I should have joined one Canyon Consulting page. But yeah, go follow that tiny little TikTok. It has limited love because I haven't been very active. But Canyon Consulting is my business where I do consultation around Jedi movements, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Let's talk about solidarity when it comes to honoring truth and history, because we need to bring Indigenous insight and have Indigenous intensives around cultural sensitivity and cultural competency. And part of that is I put on some cultural competency courses. cultural competency courses where it's honor, truth, and history, where we can honor all of our ancestry. And we talk about the impact of how colonization has impacted all of us, from Greece to Rome, all the way from all these other territories. So it's a lovely history lesson because it's outsiders coming in. And so, we want to honor truth and history about how we came to be where we are. And yeah, definitely when it comes to our island relatives, Canyon with K, Consulting with K, KK LLC. Yeah, because my name is unique, and in our language, Canyon is K is K and C is Ch. So Canyon Consulting.
I
But
want to jump
definitely,
in on that.
If you would,
continue.
please DM me that link so I can embed it in the YouTube video as well as also throw it on my
I'm writing
was
backwards
just
on the
I was
fly.
just gonna
So-
suggest
I do that too. I don't have a pen.
between you and Ginge having a really high user count, a follower count, I think it would be great for you to put that on your link tree and
I
make that
will.
widely
I will.
available.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I'm
100%.
definitely
I will
going to.
certainly do that. TJ. Well, actually, hang on a second. Sorry, before we go to TJ, we had an audience question, Ginge.
It's just kind of what we were messaging back and forth. And would you talk about that little pamphlet that you're holding up?
Roger that.
Would you tell us about what's in that pamphlet? Native Chick.
So I actually, this is the fun part about, especially about Indigenous identity, is as a Native person of the Bay Area, being told that I don't exist, or being told that there's no such thing as a full Costanoan, Ohlone person, or everyone's just like, oh, you're Native American. What are you? Are you Sioux? Are you Lakota? Are you Cherokee? Are you? Oh, I your tattoos, isn't that Inuit? Oh, I love your moko. Are you from New Zealand? I'm just sitting here like, I'm California native from right here. This is my homeland. This is my home. Do California natives not exist to you? Like, seriously. But I don't say it. I say it on the inside because they don't know what they don't know, and not everybody deserves that kind of energy just coming out the gate. That being said, I go to classrooms all the time. I talk to fourth graders because in California we have this fourth grade curriculum. It's the mission curriculum, learning about the 21 missions. And the mission curriculum only offers one-sided narrative. It's very, very frustrating because you learn about the Spaniards coming to California and all the missions are one day apart. And did you know that the missions weren't all that popular until 1920s or 1940s, when there was a big old promotional ad that California had to validate why homesteading and traveling and touring to California was so valid. So like the missions got like a comeuppance in the advertising realm as touristic hotspots. So it's actually like they weren't all that much of a hotspot for a while. That being said, as a Native person, always talking, just catching people up, I don't have much of a life or much of a, if I think about Indigenous futurisms, I don't have much of a life if I'm catching everybody up. If I'm telling everybody truth and history, I'm saying the same sentences, the same stories. I need mini zines, and all it is literally, it's mini zine technology. Taking a single piece of paper, literally a single piece of paper. I'm a graphic designer, so I graphic designed it, and then you fold it strategically, you fold it together strategically, and then you just set it back down, and you fold it. And so what I did, and it turns into an 8-page turnable magazine. You can do this with normal white piece of paper and have a great notepad because you will not waste as much white paper. So you can use this technology for yourself on a blank piece of paper to take notes and throw it in your pocket. But I put
really cool
information about Indigenous peoples of the Bay, and in one of them is educational resources, a whole link list, even of books and educational resources such as, I don't know, Benjamin Madley, an American Genocide, or Elias Castillo, A Cross of Thorns, where he talked about how, the Spaniards and the Padres committed atrocious crimes against Indigenous peoples, and they're recorded. It's not just negative stories. And so it's Elias Castillo, Cross of Thorns, Michelle Lorimer, A California Mission Myth. A lot of people love to assume, oh, the Spaniards brought the missions and it civilized the natives and it taught them how to be cleaner and it taught them how to be better workers and live in buildings and not be so primitive or savage. It's like, excuse me, did you know that the Spaniards were suffering from scurvy when they came here? Did you know that they brought foreign diseases? They brought foreign animals that couldn't even graze. There was troublesome behaviors. And like Unipa Sierra, he was canonized and he became a saint recently. Yet he had multiple signs. If he'd been listening to his ancestors and the signs, he got a bug bite that got infected and he almost lost his leg. It's like, you know, when you get signs like, I shouldn't be here, I shouldn't be doing this, I'm getting all these messages. He did not listen. He thought he was saving the people. The only good thing that Unipacera did in bringing the missions was, thank you, missions, for keeping good records. You're helping my people know about our records and our birth certificates and our genealogical lines and our family having records. Thank you. Thank you. But other than that, the missions brought devastation. And when people say it wasn't an intentional genocide, did you know that they brought the missions to Baja California and they had statistical metrics validating that it impacted over 80% of the population? They knew through the numbers that it would deeply impact the indigenous people. And they still, the crown still validated it. Spaniards validated, Padres validated, church validated, and said, let's go save the people, because the Papal Bulls and the doctrine of discovery validate colonizing a Christian state, colonizing in the name of religion, colonizing and all of that fun stuff, where it's a superiority complex. I'm not going to bash anybody for having faith and believing what you believe. I have a problem with what humans have done in regards to validating committing atrocious crimes and seeing people as subhuman and animals. I'm very passionate about this one. I get so mad. I get so angry. Because the docents that are meant to be educators, the docents that are at these missions don't even know truth and history. So they are getting, they're not actually paid. They're volunteer, but the docents are holding a position of power and authority of informing people. And they're not even offering as much information that is available. There's documented record and there's indigenous peoples everywhere talking about this, but they're not even informing properly. And that's, I get so angry.
It's hard to tell, but I would say it's probably not anger; it's actual passion. So I would certainly want to give you that more than anger.
It's valid and fair. Like, that's an intersection between Indigenous Americans and Irish, Scottish, and, well, most of the fucking world that isn't white. So that's a common story.
You mentioned the three key ingredients that I caught something in the chat that I want to connect to that. Diversity, inclusion, and equity, DEI. I want to bounce it down to TJ for a minute before we come back up. So the DEI perspective, connecting to what was in the chat, is one of the statements was, well, it's good that we're talking finally about the Indigenous experience rather than just the Black experience. As far as DEI, particularly in higher ed, is concerned, I think you and I both fought similar battles, if you will. And when I think back now, how DEI was actually applied in that context as well as in the workspace, I see that there is a little bit of a competitive element for time and eyeballs and eardrums, because there's only so much. Perfect. I like that. Whoever that was, thank you. It was a good one.
Unicorn
I see that there's a little bit of competition for space, time, as well as just eardrums. TJ, what's your experience with the competitive element of DEI?
On the East Coast, there are really no Indigenous people per se that applied to our college. So in all of my years, there's a handful of Native American people I think that have applied. But as a person who has a deep interest, I made a point of really making that month really important on our campus, where we had the different nations from the East Coast represented, as well as I brought out elders from the Rosebud, and we had upwards of 6 rooms, and we would have a dance social, and I taught the students how to present elders with gifts, with the meaning of tobacco. So the students learned quite a bit. And in our 10th year, they actually made one of the elders an honorary student at WPI, which never had been done before. So that was kind of cool. So I think awareness became important, but in terms of admission to school, there was never really an effort for engineering students unfortunately. Now, when I was in Wisconsin, forgive me, but was pretty racist. I worked on the Stockbridge-Muncie Reservation a long time ago and attended University of Wisconsin, and racism was pretty strong. The other simple components were we always build square classrooms instead of thinking in terms of circular classrooms. When we present, we present in terms of A to Z instead of going A to F and then back to B and then tying it to A and then circling back around. But everything is always so linear. And then we never include symbols. We don't include pictures. We don't include music. So the way we teach proves to be a failure for many Indigenous people. There's just so many different things that the dominant culture is not taking into consideration when the very people whose land and culture and animals we destroyed, we should be looking to for how do we get out of this climate crisis? How do we break the sixth extinction? And we're doing nothing to listen to them when we should be in their classroom versus saying, please come to ours. It's all upside down.
It's interesting when I think back, I think I only had 2 Native students that ever identified themselves, which kind of makes me wonder now, how many have I missed because they just chose to blend in to escape a variety of perhaps negative associations and suppression and what have you. Makes me really wonder where we went wrong rather than being inviting and perhaps accidentally not thinking about it and contributed to the suppression. But with the competition go ahead.
We've always been wrong. That's the problem. We've always been wrong. It's not that we went wrong, right? From an educational perspective from the get-go, right? We have to remember that we are teaching history in a way that prevents us from suffering from that thing called white guilt, right? So we went wrong way back when we started writing the history books. And the problem isn't that we've gone wrong. The problem is that we're perpetuating truths. Exactly. That is the problem, is that we've been perpetuating it. And we've got curriculum to this day that we're fighting to teach our children that isn't even the right curriculum anyway. And I want to say, just because I am the king of completely derailing any conversation, Native Chick and TJ, if you two held a podcast together, I would fucking listen to it on a daily basis. Something about TJ's way of being completely stoned and Native Chick's way of being completely enthusiastic, I would absolutely listen to a podcast of the two of you. I'm just throwing it out there.
I second that.
I mean, on that note, I think that was the high note we should just end right now. There is nothing left to go. See, and here I am with all the serious questions. I don't know, Ginge, if you had one. Otherwise, I'm going to lob another one.
Can I make another point real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on a second. PJ?
We'll go ahead and have Ginge go first, but if I could make a point after she's completed.
100%. I just wanted to piggyback off Gen X Dad. When we talk about, because I was just looking it up because I remembered something I'd watched recently. We talk about Indigenous erasure and just kind of what historically we tend to prioritize. Did you know that the Great Pyramid of Giza is not the biggest pyramid in the world, and that the more advanced archaeological or architectural feat was actually done by the Aztecs because they didn't have the wheel and they brought these stones from so far away? We look at Latin America and the tribes prior to Spanish and European colonization. The biggest feats were done in Central and South America by Hispanic descended, Latin descended people, and or ancestors. Sorry, because and hold on, because I had to look up. That's what I was looking up a second ago. I didn't go anywhere. The largest pyramid is Cholula in Pueblo, and it is over. I think they said it's over the 450-meter sided base is 4 times the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and no wheels, no round things to move big stone. So like we talk about indigenous and Latin erasure. I just wanted to make that point and just kind of
there's
piggyback
there's
off the
whole shows
mishistory.
devoted to saying that's aliens that did it.
Right?
They can't believe
Right?
they did nothing.
Because white people would rather believe that aliens did it than these savage cultures. And I say that as an Irish woman, Irish descended and being called savage as well. Yeah. So I am my mother's savage daughter. But like, and that's one of my favorite think kinks lately has been looking into Latin American and Latin indigenous history, because it's far surpasses what Europeans hold in such high regard. It's
Well, and then
monumental.
everything that they even do give us credit for in schools, because also I have to deal with this in my own kid's curriculum, and she's like young.
I bet.
She's in TK right now, but even her early start program, I had to talk to the teacher about Baby Shark Thanksgiving or whatever, because it was like not something that was appropriate for kids, especially like this weird dumbed down little nursery rhyme, right? And then obviously it goes back to the mission things, like you can't really say that stuff was in good faith when you go to the missions today. But even when I did my own, I did freaking mission San Rafael or whatever. And my mom just said, like, my mom was always kind of honest with me about stuff, but when I was like, okay, like, if there are questions, she's all, ask them about, the cemetery, ask them about the graves there. No. And the way that they talk about it there when they're teaching children, I was in 4th grade, is them being like, those are the souls that they saved when we were converted. And it's like, that is not, those are 2 different things going on there. And like, it's hard to say too, because we have grown adults thinking that, like, back to like you said, where like they still think we live in teepees or these, old school things that were not even stationary, that was meant for when you're traveling, and things like that. They think those things because that is the curriculum we currently have, and it has been like that since I was in school.
It is
I mean,
racist as hell.
yeah, well,
Prejudiced as hell.
and if you even like, I saw a user in here who made some really good comment. One creative native had really good points and stuff, and the comment was, I would be fired if I taught curriculum how it's supposed to be taught, or how I did. And that's 100, because the second we say anything even bordering the truth that makes people uncomfortable, no matter how nice we try to sugarcoat it to make it palatable, because we are, at the end of the day, just trying to teach each other. Like, if I don't know something, I'm not gonna, that's why I let Canyon do the talking when she knows all the stuff. But like, especially as a light complected native and reconnecting native, my job is to talk to other white people about this. Like, everything else, who are actually connected people, they've got it handled. All people need to do is listen. That is the biggest thing. The resources are there. Everything has been laid out for you. People who are reconnecting or people who are helping others reconnect, set all those up. She just gave everyone a freaking website, all these things, that paper. I have that paper on my fridge right now. That is so much information that school won't even let you look at. They see you have loaded up on the computer. They're like, you're a little young for that, when you're in high school, when we're the ones having to deal with the repercussions of that. And it's just crazy that I'm 31. It's been like this for longer than I've been alive, many, many times over.
Native chick, you just mentioned 4th graders.
Yeah.
Knowledge hungry people, I would hope, little people that are knowledge hungry. How are they perceiving you? What is your experience with the 4th graders?
I'm in the Bay Area, so I got the Bay Bubble benefits of privileges in Silicon Valley. Some of these kids are teaching me some crazy awesome things. I learned about compost from a fourth grade. I've been composting all my life. I learned more science from this little fourth grader that I was like, whoa, these young beings are amazing. So I'm feeling really lucky to be in the Bay Area. However, I can see their parents reflected in them. There was one really strong personality kid. I saw his parents reflected in his behaviors and his mannerisms, and my heart was breaking because I know he was just reflecting what he's been taught in the mannerisms, in delivery of words. So it was a little painful. But I pray that he gets a chance to be included with diverse communities and diverse cultures, so he can get a chance to be exposed to different perspectives, because sometimes we don't get to choose our parents, we don't get to choose our family, and most of the time I'm really lucky because the Bay Bubble is pretty awesome. I do want to point out that, in 2015 or 2016, the mission curriculum was whatever it means to be broken down and taken away, because we have this whole like Truth and Reconciliation Council, California, Gavin Newsom, all that crazy fun stuff, and so more teachers are trying to learn. So I get to be lucky and busy consulting with teachers. However, I want to point out that especially further east of me, further east of California, did you know why? You want to know why the Confederation, people obsessed in the Confederacy and the Confederation is so popular? Did you know that after the war, there were women called Daughters of the Golden West? They went around and they changed curriculum. They pushed their agenda to honor their veterans, to honor the war, especially their 13 states, to honor and acknowledge these war heroes, these elders deserving of acknowledgement, and they shifted the narrative about how the Confederacy was reflected in the in our education system. So that is why a lot of the highlighted statues were really popular. And it's like, wait a second, I, as a Native person who's always known my culture, has been called a history revisionist, when in all actuality I'm honoring truth and history, and people whose fragile attitude and entitled attitude, who actually is following a revisionist narrative, is so freaked out that they call me a revisionist and call me an extremist and a leftist and a progressive and whatever other labels. I'm sitting here, I'm a person of the earth. I'm an Indigenous person, proud of my ancestry, who's going to do whatever I can, whenever I can, for as long as I can, to honor my ancestors and to be a good ancestor in training. And so that being said, we need to learn about why things are the way they are, and that means looking at the laws, looking at the treaties. Did you know that treaties are the law of the land? Yet there are 18 unratified treaties in California, and many of the treaties that the United States government made as guarantees to Indigenous nations were all broken. It's like, wait,
Standing Rock.
And we're going to talk about the Constitution being so important, and certain elements of the Constitution should never be challenged, yet Indigenous treaties and agreements made by the United States government validated in the Constitution as legitimate law and ways to follow these rules have been dismissed. It's like, wait a second, what selective game are we playing? Are we just playing I win, where the kid who's losing the game says, I change the rules now, I'm only allowed to do this and doing this now? That's exactly what the United States government happens to be doing when it comes to rules and enacting strategies. It's like so frustrating.
Which brings me to the Supreme Court elephant in the room, ICWA, which is yet again under attack, the Indian Child Welfare Act. Are you
we still want
guys?
To get back to TJ as well.
Oh, sorry. Yes, TJ. Before we go ICWA, let's go TJ.
Okay. So before I start, native chicken venom. You know what Anbloglaka is? Spirit talk. That the two of you, before I say what I'm going to say, I would be presenting you tobacco and telling you that the name of my elders. So that's out of respect for the two of them that I would have to do that before I say what I'm going to say. So I want to talk a bit about appropriation. That back in 1990, when I went to the reservation, the elders at that time were very, very accepting of someone of my color. The medicine wheel was and is still on the rosebud, black, red, yellow, and white. And what they say is that those represent the four colors of the people on the planet. And so to be a participant in the INI and to be a participant in Sundance was not a problem. Now, the third year rather, after my first elder passed away, someone up north, or rather in the east and the north, got upset about my being on the reservation and turned me in, if you want to say, to AIM, the American Indian Movement. And they put me on a death list. So the people on the Rosebud were really concerned because their lives were in danger. The people from the American Indian Movement came out to Massachusetts, where I was living, to talk to me to see who this white guy was. And what they did was, before they left, they made me a member of the American Indian Movement. That's how accepting they were. And over the years, I have Sundance 16 times, and something that Native chick will understand is that I'm Yuwipi. And that's not so people who hear about that would say, oh, you're an appropriator. Appropriation is when you take something, when you're invited, when you are a part of a family. That is not appropriation. And I would encourage any dominant colored person to join an Indigenous or Native family with respect and, again, with your ears open, and you'll have a family for life. And that's not appropriation. That would be becoming, just a family member. Hunka, it's called. Hunka, it's wonderful. So.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really nice.
Mm.
Can definitely tell.
Yeah.
Experience.
Exactly. Tying those two elements in. So that's actually ironic, that the tying of the question of Equa and then this, because that is totally true. Appropriation is pretty much the concept of settler colonialism, of resource extraction, feeling entitled and taking without giving back, taking without knowledge, and not being accountable or reciprocal or humble to that action. But being invited in, being offered gifts, being invited into these spaces, you are in community and you are a person of the land, and therefore, like, being in community, you have the right to be in that circle and the right to be present. And so being community is important, and it is not self-proclaimed. It's the community who claim you. So you got to behave and you need to be accountable, and community will claim you because they will see you show up through your actions and through your integrity, and therefore that you are family. They will be ready to go to bat for you, so to speak, because they see you show up, they see you act right, and they will defend you while you're not in the room. They'll defend you while you're in the room. Or if you're slipping up, then your actions will.
The tough love you need. Like, it's a learning curve,
Yeah. Yep. And then, so like with ICWA, Indian Child Welfare Act, there have been some interesting changes, but at the same time, like, Indian Child Welfare Act have been so many times, like especially in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, where Indigenous children were stolen from Indigenous peoples and taken off the land to be raised by non-Indigenous peoples. And it's another form of kill the Indian, save the man. There was a Relocation Act of taking Native peoples off of the reservation to stop them from being Indigenous, and then supposedly lie to them about giving them jobs, giving them education, giving them a place to be in these more urban environments, and then they just transport them and drop them off. So there's these laws and actions that have disenfranchised Indigenous peoples with either the falsehood of agreements or promises. And so ICWA was a way that we need to protect our babies. And okay, if you come from a different culture, if you already have the rules in place of like what a safe home is or how you should be taking care of a community, did you know that a good portion of the Indigenous reservations don't have running water? We don't have full-time electricity. I live 100% off grid. and we have a well. Like my mom had to pay thousands of dollars just to get a phone line. And so we still are 100% off the grid in a log cabin with, yay, thank gosh we have a septic tank now. But I mean, I had my first microwave at 2013. No, not even 2015 was the first time I had a microwave. I had a CD player when I was 14. Like I'm a millennial. So I mean, like I had those. I'm more of a Gen X in regards to accessibility. But when it comes to these laws, when it comes to these considerations, do you realize how the child protective services would say this child is in an unsafe environment? We need to protect this child. They're barefoot, or they are living with dirt floors, or there's corners, or there's no refrigerator. Like, see what I mean? Like, this is a dangerous environment. So and then the painful part is you have intergenerational trauma, historical trauma. You have indigenous peoples who are medicating themselves. Why? Because the environment is not healthy, and dominantly when people are stuck in addictions or medicating themselves, dominantly it's because something's going on. It's not just I want to do this and it feels good. It's trying to satiate an issue. So when you think about indigenous peoples having the highest rate of diabetes, the highest rate of addiction, highest rate of various problems that we see in society, people go, they're the bad people. It's like, no. What is causing this? Oh, wait, indigenous peoples can't be themselves traditionally. Indigenous peoples have their land taken away and they can't hunt traditionally. They can't harvest their medicines traditionally. They can't access places differently. Their water is being poisoned. They don't have access to these things. Like, let's look at it and then let's say. So, yeah, I want to just point that out because Indian Child Welfare Act, there's so many different shifting and behaviors. I haven't even kept up with all of the stuff. So, apologies on that one.
Ginger.
You touched on something that I wanted to address, and I actually had to look up. If you are in the crewmates or you're in the chat and you live anywhere near Navajo lands, right now I think it's 49% of Navajo reservations do not have clean running water. So if you want to have an actionable item right now that you could do tomorrow day, buy up some cases of water. And if you live in Albuquerque or anywhere else in the Southwest with Navajo nations near you, donate some water to the tribes, to the res, and give them a big handout. When it comes to, I had another question. I just lost it because I was looking that up. I'll come back with it. Keep going.
There is this, I hope we can clean up with the misconception. That is that native lands, tribal lands are basically drug loaded and alcohol is rampant and essentially anything that regular society would massively object to. For one, is that even true? And for two, if that is indeed the case, where does this come from? How can it be addressed if it actually really is the case, which I'm hoping it is not and is just sensationalized in the media, which then leads me to part two of the question, employment around native lands, which when I, for instance, go up in Minnesota or North Dakota and, butt up to the Canadian border and whatnot, I noticed that there are very few opportunities for employment. So maybe one correlates and connects to the other in one way or another. So again, big topic, but I just want to throw to either one of you if you have any input.
I'll let Nate go real quick because I think I have a quote somewhere, so I'm gonna look for a quote really quick.
You quote away. Nate's take it.
Okay, that's the biggest thing is it's so multifaceted because one, it goes back to the whole we're all such different peoples, like not only people connected, disconnected, but even every tribal member connected to their culture on their homelands, right? Some stuff I will say, at least from what I've been told by peers, is some stuff isn't sensationalized as far as certain areas with like heavy abuse, but like you have to think in the same way we have to ask the question like urban areas here, like if you're, by the bay and stuff, because we deal with similar issues but in a different context. How come there's food deserts? How come there's not access to food? How come all this stuff, even though supposedly everyone gets money on the reservation, that's not, obviously that's false. How come it's only drug related things or things that get in the first place? anywhere where it is like that, it has been a calculated effort to push that on people from first contact when they first gave us alcohol. And that's one of those things, it's really hard for us to navigate around as well, because at the end of the day, in normal American, colonial culture, drinking is a social thing that you're supposed to be able to keep up with. And that wasn't something that was originally part of our cultural practices or anything. And the way that white people tend to talk about it is like, well, that's our fault for not being able to hold our liquor, when that was never it. It's that it was a calculated effort to make us more, what's the word? Malleable's not the word.
Susceptible, subservient.
Susceptible. Well, and I'm sorry, but stuff like that, as much as sometimes, the kind of born again sobers can kind of rub people the wrong way, at the end of the day, that's a little closer to what we were before. Yet we all want to drink and have fun and be social because that's how the outside world operates. But then you bring it home and it's not used for the same purpose of socializing and things like that. And it goes back to what Canyon was saying before, is what is, in any addiction, what is the root issue? That doesn't just spawn out of thin air. That's never been our understanding of addiction in the first place. So the fact that that stereotype gets shoved onto us, no matter how connected or non-connected. Like when I was a bartender, anytime I wore anything or whatever, I would get the jokes. I would get the like, oh, drunk Indian, as I'm serving them alcohol. They're the ones drinking, not me, And somehow I'm still the butt of the joke in that racist context, But I hope I didn't segue from the question. Oh, I'm so bad with that.
No, you didn't at all. You're right. You're right in the pocket. It's wonderful. Okay. Thank you.
And then, did you find your quote, Canyon?
Did you?
I see your book.
You did. Yeah. But I just wanted to ask.
So this is a quote from one of my California Indigenous relatives, Dreama Jeff. She was actually on stage with me at Bioneers with Lila June Johnston, who is Dene, and Bioneers is a conference that's amazing in the Bay Area. So the way she put it is important for the decolonization of humanity. The health of Native people, who are direct descendants of any territory, the health pertaining to mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, call their allies, is directly linked to the health of the land. And at this point in time, these effects are also cross-territorial. If colonization in Europe having ramifications that affected the entire world, and specifically on Turtle Island, by creating farming environments that left people surrounded by fecal matter, to which Europeans developed a tolerance to, which is one of my fundamental reasons why Native people in the Western Hemisphere didn't have the same immunity. European people may not have killed a heartbreaking abundance of Native people, but colonization did. Direct human infection or not, the direct human infliction, if not, and direct descendants of every territory have indigenous language, culture, and connection to land, and we are still here. While we live in a westernized technical first world country, technical first world country, colonization is just as harmful today as it was when the diseases and genocide began spreading in the Western Hemisphere of 1942, and it reflects the westernized statistics of representing Native people's suffering. Now, she also went on, and I do not know where the rest of the quote went, but there was a conversation that we had talking about the health of the indigenous peoples is immediately reflected upon the health of the land. So if the health of the land is not doing well, look to the indigenous peoples. If the health of the indigenous peoples is not doing well, the health of the land is also bound to suffer. And it's very, very frustrating because when you think about it, when we are impacted, and it's a byproduct of settler colonialism. It's painful. It's pervasive. Like our own indigenous relatives will sell culture and engage in cultural appropriation. Our own indigenous relatives will tokenize themselves or commodify themselves to survive. Yet people want to blame the individual when it is a behavior, it is a pattern, it is a reaction, it is a reflection. With anything, when you're tracking, you want to track the causality, causation. And so, like when we look at MMIW, missing and murdered indigenous women, and also girls and Two-Spirit, and MMIW, GTS, when we acknowledge these acronyms, like a lot of people try and say, well, it's their choice. Some of the occurrences are like, what were they wearing? Were they intoxicated? Where were they? And some of them will actually blame the women for being near or on man camps. And man camps are establishments that are dominantly around the petroleum industry, oil industry, or spaces where they're creating spaces, like building. Man camps are there to build stuff and extract and technically extract. And when you have man camps, you have human behavior starved for attention and resources, and there is going to be human interactions of which disparaged and marginalized community members are going to utilize what resources they have. If you are either a two-spirit community member or a female-bodied being with limited resources, and the only asset you have is your body, and potentially if you're suffering both either mental, physiological, or emotional damage, and you might have addictions, or you just might need have you resource you have needs to survive. You need food. You may need to feed that addiction. You may need to satiate that pain, or you have children. You are going to use the strongest asset you have is your body, and you're going to put your body on the line. And by putting your body on the line, there are risky environments. And when people see people as subhuman, these man camps will throw away women after they use them, even though they might be thinking they're engaging in a consensual adult dynamic of decision making. There is a desecration of life and disrespect and disregard of the sacred feminine. And so I want to point this out, is like people constantly try and like blame the supposed victim, and it's like, look at the cause. We are raping the earth, we are raping the woman, and then we're raping women, and abusing. And it's like, you need to look at the cause. What is the cause, and what is the pain? What is the trauma? What is the ongoing infliction? So it's frustrating. Yeah.
You are. You sound like Mickey Mouse on steroids right now.
Oh, I was on replay again.
I hear myself now. I just heard myself.
It wasn't like that the whole time. It was just a thing.
So I don't know exactly what's going on. James, you're not coming through at all.
She waited so long.
Leave the floor for me. All right. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So recently I found out about a situation in Oklahoma as they were trying to legalize cannabis, which, yeah. Okay. So what they're doing, it's being done in two ways: labor slavery as well as trafficking women. But they are bringing in migrant workers from south of the border to come in and farm the cannabis farms that are running for the medical marijuana or medical cannabis. I don't know if we can say MJ on this app, but any hoozle. But they're holding these women and these workers hostage by taking their papers, taking their identification. And this is happening rampantly in Oklahoma. And recently, one of the big areas just south of Tulsa, it's kind of southeast Oklahoma, the sheriff's office went on a big, I did a video about it, I think. It was a big to-do. So I wanted to just kind of alert everybody to that while I have these two wonderful humans, because we've gotten to the brink of this, and I'm just going to go ahead and volley us into it. I've learned a lot by listening, and so I would love for you to tell us about cultural appreciation when you come in, when you live on res land like I do, and say you see sage or dream catchers and things like that. You've gotten to the brink of this, and I would love if you would just kind of go ahead and spike it in for us about what is appreciation when you go onto res lands and purchase, or what you purchase that are closed practices, to like we're seeing the Viking filter now with the fucking 2 different appropriations in that Viking filter. So I would love it if you two wonderful, beautiful human beings would shed a little light on appreciation in common white people find themselves spaces.
Want to do a 1-2 punch? You go first, Nate.
Okay. Yeah, I think mine will be a little shorter. No, okay. Again, going in, like everyone says, with humility and respect, listen more than you talk. But a big thing is, if you're invited in, just like TJ was explaining his beautiful story. If you're invited in, as long as you remain respectful and check in, typically you're fine. Obviously, the climate, especially TikTok climate, everyone's trying to like, poke out, poke holes in everything. Um, Especially if they're not even of those peoples, which cracks me up when it happens. Or sometimes well-intentioned white people will try to over-explain why something's wrong, and sometimes they tell you the wrong reason in the first place why, which is another thing you have to be kind of careful of. But another thing is, oh no, I lost my train of thought. I should have wrote it down.
Happens to me all the time. That's why you see
Oh
me
my
looking
God,
over
I
to my
feel
right,
it,
writing
like I
things down.
feel it going. Yeah, sorry, that's why I have my iPad right here so that I wouldn't get too off topic. But engaging respectfully really goes back to that whole like listening, taking in, but also acknowledge a lot of the things that we know as, and again, it goes back to the education, everything's connected. Never neglect, every single thing is connected. Um,
Yeah.
we, as white people, white natives even, tend to, oh no, it's gone. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to mess it up. It was right
It's
there.
okay. It's okay.
If anybody wants to come to the rescue, jump on in.
Oh God, I hate when I do that. I'm so sorry. Thank you guys for being patient with
I
me.
have post-COVID brain fog.
Ah.
You're in good company. It's okay.
Oh, can I? Okay, you go. I'll spit it out because I swear it's there.
Uh,
I swear I will
well,
remember it.
I'm sure it is.
yeah. Well, part of it is thinking about, okay, accessibility. Um, I have a lot of fun with this one. Like here in the Bay Area, we're all humans of the earth and we all deserve to like pray, and we're all humans of the earth and we deserve to sage off. So I deserve my Sephora witch kit, and that Sephora witch kit is totally my jam. Why? Because I have the white sage to purify the crystals, and then I pray with those crystals under the moon and I splash the sage so it dissipates all of the clear cutting, because you know what? I'm entitled to this. I want to point out to you that when it comes to medicine, when we think about accessibility, one, indigenous peoples, just because we use sage does not mean it's a pan-Indian approach. It's California white sage, and it only grows in specific places. So not all native peoples smudge and purify the air with white sage. There's Palo Santo, there's Copal, but those are also indigenous to certain areas. And yes, humans trade. Yes, this medicine travels, which is fine. However, if your access and your entitlement supersedes your considerations of learning about the indigenous peoples whose medicine is being stolen, propagated, clear cut for profit driven endeavors. And yeah, just because there's a sign at Whole Foods and a sign at that supposed store that this is ethically, sustainably harvested, excuse me? Most of the time, indigenous peoples don't charge for the medicine. They may charge for their energy. They may charge saying, I worked this many hours and I bundled. However, charging for medicine is wrong. Most of the time we trade. Most of the time we share that medicine. And it's okay to grow. Yes, it is fast and convenient to say it's a closed practice, because what ideally people should be doing is saying, why is it a closed practice? Not why I need access to it. It should be like, why is it? What happened here? What is going on? And why do I feel upset that I don't have access to something that I'm not allowed to have access to? And then look into it, being like, oh my gosh, native peoples don't even have access to their medicine. Native peoples are being denied opportunities of harvesting their medicines. So I want to point out, this is a quote that came from Facebook, and I turned it into a graphic design. So I have a Patreon, so just Patreon/Canyon, with a K. But what I did is I took a quote from Sage La Peña, a badass, amazing botanical medicine carrying, culture bearing being. I just love Sage. She's an auntie from the heavens, auntie from the ancestors. I love her. She made a quote, and I turned it into a little poster. The 10 Commandments of Harvesting Medicinal Plants. Number 1, know why you are harvesting. It matters for so many reasons, including season of gathering. 2, ask permission from the land steward, tribal nation, or local reges. What is reges? Great. Local regions, and the plant themselves, their self. 3, be sure the area is safe from toxic chemicals, road hazard. Do not harvest roadside or near cliffs. Why? Because it impacts the land. And also roadside from toxins. 4, must have 100% positive ID. Know your plants, medicine, and cycle. Know what you are harvesting or do not harvest. 5, please do not harvest endangered species. There are always alternative plants and a 2-plant symbiotic combo similars. So if the medicine that you're trying to get is endangered, don't do it. There's alternatives. There's always alternatives. Sometimes you can use 2 medicines to do that. 6, do not overharvest. There are guidelines to this, but do know steadfast rules. Each stand or each stand of or standalone species has their own growth pattern, water, sun, and soil requirements for regrowth. Do not overharvest. My mother taught me to engage in ethical and sustainable harvesting methods. Honor the life that's lived and the gift that's given. Make an offering to the plant. Sing to the plant, talk to the plant. Never take more than a fifth, if that, and only take what's necessary. And you have to know if other people have been harvesting. You have to know the water sources. You have to know the impact. All right, let me go back. Do not overharvest. Number 7. So on that, know the plant's life cycle. Some only grow from straight striated seed, others from stem or root. Goes back to number 4, which is a must have a positive plant ID. Number 8, season or dry them properly. Not in plastic bags, not in the sun, not for 4 weeks on a back porch until they turn into dry composting cellulose. So there are times that even in scarcity model or some of our communities, we accidentally hoard medicines because we are so thirsty and hungry for medicines that some of even our own indigenous relations will find ourselves hoarding these medicines and be like, oh, wait, this medicine deserves to be used. This medicine deserves to be shared. If I'm not going to utilize it, share it with the community. Number 9, store properly in glass, in the dark, or other upper airtight containers, not open to keep volatile oils in. If molds you do not follow. Number 8, meaning season and dry them properly. Number 10, use the medicine in a timely way. Medicinal quality does not last forever. Now that you've taken a life, do not waste that medicine. If you cannot use it at all, you did not follow number 6. Dispense and disperse to your family and community before it loses efficiency. And so this is just talking about practices. That's just one tiny cue in from Sage LaPena. That being said, if people work with their own medicine, people plant, and if you have a green thumb, take care of your plant babies. Share your plant babies. The same way if you had, a citrus tree and you have way too much citrus, don't hoard that wealth, share it. You can utilize it. You can give that medicine and share it. So yes, it's close practice, 4 circles of different medicines. Why? Because if people aren't willing enough to learn truth and history to understand why it is we're upset with these things, then you don't deserve access. You don't deserve access to it because you're just trying to spiritually bypass and engage in something like, I deserve access to, I deserve to pray. It's like, no, you learn why. Did you know that there are people clear cutting white sage and throwing them in garbage bags and bundling them by that's another exploitative model of people from both South America and Mexico. There are indigenous peoples that are being engaged in slave labor in regards to bundling medicines and exploited. So it's resource extraction on resource extraction on resource extraction. And it's like, for what? Because people want to feel included into a spiritual practice of which they know nothing about because they want to feel as though they're in something. It's really, really frustrating. And so the passion is real. There are medicines around the world and also medicines of your own people, from lavender to cedar to the various grasses. You can work with medicines that are in your garden. You could work with medicines in your environment, and you could be respectful to that knowledge and that wisdom. And it's beautiful because if you have a green thumb, you can share that with people. But it's also important that you learn about the indigenous peoples and how they do have or don't have access. It's frustrating when people have medicinal and edible foraging courses, yet they don't talk about colonization. They don't have land acknowledgements. They're profiting off of something. It's like, why is your class so popular? Because of the history. What a concept. But you're profiting off of it. It's like bypassing. And it's like, be accountable.
I remember
we're running headfirst into capitalism, right? That's where the issue originates.
Oh, sorry.
Really quick before we go to Nate, we're closing into the top of the hour. So in the chat section, if you have any last minute questions, please throw them at us. We'll do certainly one more big sweep round for everyone to, for one, plug themselves and their initiatives, their projects, their websites. Particularly, I'm excited to hear from TJ also what he's doing with his just phenomenal lessons that I think really bridge the gap. And then if you have any resources to recommend, so if you want to think about that already before we close for tonight. So over to Nate.
Oh, sorry. All I remembered was what I was going to say, just because it piggybacked on what she was saying, was at the end of the day, if you're not respecting, okay, one, if you're trying to do whatever you're going to do for ceremony, spirits, whatever, I know a lot of this gets like brought up on like witch talk or certain other subsects of TikTok where they don't really touch on the whole like indigenous side of it. But if you're only getting part of the foraging, part of the wisdom, part of the story, the things you put back out into the world are going to be wrong. Like at the end of the day, there's a reason it's so annoying and like infuriating seeing people culturally appropriate, not only hoarding like resources that aren't really theirs to begin with, and even then we're not always even arguing if it's our resource or whatever, because that's never what it's been about. It just needs to be able to be replenished and treated respectfully. And a big issue with what we as a capitalist American society are doing is we're only taking little pieces of stuff we like and then reenacting it out wrong into the world, and then acting surprised when things didn't end up the way, oh, but they told me this is how I garden, this is how I raise my children. Like I remember there was a gentle, and I promise I'll cut it off quick. There was a gentle parenting post that I remember getting eaten alive on a long time ago because all I said was, these are indigenous practices, and it wasn't even like in a know-it-all way. It was just, these are what we did with our kids before. We talked through storytelling, we engaged, we did all these things, but then we only took a little piece of that and then slapped a title on it and sold a book, and that's what we get. But that's not really teaching the teachings that we need to be learning as a community. And everyone wants to live in a commune, or I don't know if you've seen the resurgence on TikTok of everyone being scared by political things lately of like, I just want to self forage, and I want to grow my own greens. I want to do all these and become self-sustained, or I want to go get land and get a commune. Whose land is that commune going to be on? I don't know where you're going to make up this little extra plot for you and your homies, but it starts with what's already here and how we can collectively listen and like repair that relationship with the earth and with each other, and that applies to all of us across the board.
I do appreciate you throwing in the homies, which got me a little off guard. That was definitely good for you and the homies. Last sweep through the panel, if you were so kind to humor us on that. For one, please, of course, plug the initiatives, what you got going on. TJ, for sure, I am super excited to hear what you're cooking, because if you're not following TJ, you're doing yourself a disservice. I just want to openly and honestly state that. What is going on right now on your docket, TJ?
Thank you so much. You're really kind. Let's see. So I wrote down the word Yakuana. Yakuana is a very important film that was done in the early 1990s. On that film, you're going to see a grouping of elders, and that grouping of elders, including Marcos Terena from Brazil, said that the indigenous people of the world are willing to teach their technology to the dominant culture, because the dominant culture has killed all of the indigenous peoples. And now, if we're not going to pass away from this climate crisis, then we all need to be guardians of the earth. So there's a particular man there named Bobby McLeod, who is Aboriginal Australian. And I met him the next year. He agreed to teach a class called Indigenous Wisdom and Modern Technology. And he taught me something called life lore and dead law. Over the years, as I learned more from Bobby, I had elders that were Dene, Hopi, Crow, Lakota, Nakota, Anishinaabe, Penobscot, and they all concurred that this life lore is what is going to save the world. So On Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Zoom, free of charge, I'm sharing what those elders shared with me. And it's simply the things that they shared, the stories and the truths regarding how to be with nature, how to be with the mother. It's not ceremonies or anything along that line. It's simply the wisdom, the truth of Mother Earth that I've learned from. I have the list of all of the elders. There are about 25 elders from different nations. So, and I can put up it's about 5 posts ago. I have the Zoom number and the name of all the elders, but I can put it up again tomorrow if people want me to.
Yes, please. I think that would be great for everybody to share in. Let's see. Gen X, what you got?
You know, I don't have a lot to contribute because this panel was so freaking amazing tonight. I think this is probably one of your best lives ever. I do want to say that I absolutely love both Nate and Native. What you both had to say, it touched deeply. I do want to say, you know, my little sphere of TikTok here is focused on neurodivergence. I will be in Hawaii all week next week, and I will probably be doing some live, doing some yoga at 5 a.m. on the beach, connecting with nature, TJ. So you're welcome to join me. For Prof and Ginge, because of my pinched nerve, I am going to be partaking in edibles, and I'm going to do it on live TikTok because I don't give a shit. So up to you to
We can do
edit
that
that out.
later. We
But
can do that on the dark side.
Nate and Native Chick, you two, I cannot tell you how much I would love to listen to your lives moving forward. I think you are a spiritual wealth of wisdom, and you have so much to offer. And even to me, who is a former Republican who has changed his ways and has learned to connect with nature and spirit and mother. You two are very close to me, more than you know. And I love you both for what you contributed tonight. It has been amazing.
Thank you. Hope
Much
I hope I was
appreciated.
helpful.
And James, this is for you.
Yes. Get rid of that
Oh,
imposter
okay,
syndrome,
okay.
Nate. Get rid of that imposter syndrome. You are valid. You are valued.
I will always have the perspective of the white person from the half Asian dude. So I will always do that. But your Becky was way better than my Becky. So thank you.
Oh
Nate,
Like, oh my
my
God.
Nate,
Becky
what you got for
her
us?
butt.
Oh,
Ooh.
like a plug?
Yeah, you're up. Resources, films,
Oh no.
documentaries, anything you want to share.
Ooh, honestly, the documentary, is it the one you put below, Canyon? That's the one I would
Gather.
recommend. Is that the one with your mom? Which
Oh,
one is
in
the
the
one with
land of
your
my
mom?
ancestors. On
Land
my
of my
website, Canyon
ancestors.
Consulting, there's a mini documentary, like 10 minutes, literally 10 minutes. And actually, oh, dude, this is funny. TikTok, someone shared 3 minute of my mom's documentary, and it is our copyright, right? But when I posted it, TikTok said no. And it's our documentary. It was so funny. So on YouTube, in the land of my ancestors, but on YouTube, Coyote Woman's Creations is my YouTube, as well as Canyon Consulting, is my YouTube as well. Canyon Consulting LLC. Mini documentary in the land of my ancestors tells a little story about right where Nate lives, our ancestral homelands, and a resource and of the community, a safe haven and a sacred site. So yeah, thanks, Nate. You're
All I can do
plugging
is
for
plug
me.
local, only because I typically make like autism, trans, and anime content. So this is a little out of my depth just because I happen to just coincide. But
But
anything I can do to help.
for your first live, you absolutely killed it. Ginge, any resources, documentaries, books, podcasts, anything in between? What you got?
Yes, I just want to reiterate Gather the movie, In the Land of My Ancestors. And somebody mentioned a book down in the chat called Braiding Sweetgrass. And again, I just want to plug John Leguizamo's Latin History for Morons. If you want to get into what I kind of volleyed at these wonderful humans, John Leguizamo's Latin History for Morons is entertaining and educational, and it's very, very cool. So Braiding Sweetgrass for book, In the Land of My Ancestors, and Gather the movie. And go to her website, and me and him are going to put it in our link trees.
Also, All My Relations podcast and Real Engine, the documentary. That's a great introduction to learning about Indigenous peoples in the media. Real Engine. My mom met one of the gentleman who does the falling off horses. She met him in Mission San Juan Bautista, and he's talking about riding horses, right? And she's talking to him saying, "Oh, I just watched this wonderful movie. Have you heard of Real Engine?" And this gentleman goes, "Yes, I was interviewed in it."
I liked the blurb on it, but because it said INJUN, I was worried that it would be not a good one because they used that term. So I will.
On purpose.
Okay, I will.
Yep.
Okay, I'll add it to my watch list and get it watched soon. Yeah.
Totally.
Right, so,
And yeah, Yellowstone in 1928, all those are really good. They talk about some good stuff.
What was the podcast? I'm sorry.
All My Relations. Yeah, All My Relations podcast. Yeah, All My Relations. They talk about blood quantum. They talk about pretendians. They talk about indigeneity. They talk about kink and polyamory. I was like, yes. So yeah. And then there's
suddenly the podcast is exploding. Really quick, in the comment section, I couldn't miss it. Warrior Dot Never Give Up. Happy birthday tomorrow. Thanks for joining us tonight. Before I just say thank you to the panel, of course, I want to just say everybody in the chat section, you guys are rock stars. The panel, as always, you guys are a wealth of knowledge. To appreciate you would be an understatement. As far as my resource is concerned, I hope I don't burn my fingers with that, if you will. It's more or less a gateway drug, if you will, to the indigenous idea of experience. It was written by a former professor of Bemidji State University, Kent Nurburn, Neither Wolf Nor Dog. I don't know if it made mainstream, but I used it in one of my classes. I read it at speed track because it was really well written. And it was about the journey of essentially a white college professor trying to figure out how to connect with tribal members, and particularly the elders. And I believe he went from Minnesota over to North Dakota. Don't hold me to that. It's been a couple of years since I read that. But Neither Wolf Nor Dog with Kent Nurburn. Maybe a good gateway drug to really have at least a soft landing and truly kind of understand as to what this is all about. Other than that, the mods, once again, on the back end, you guys keep us safe. Thank you so much for doing all that. The panel, like I said, fantastic. I want to bring you back if you so choose that you want to educate us and teach us again. Please, I would love to do this in the future again and just continue to give you the space that we commonly don't share. And I think that is probably the best use of TikTok as we have it. With that, thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you again next week with another topic. Until then, have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.